What's up, y'all? It's your boy Dravo Payne. And look, if you ever happen to be at an art museum and somehow you stumble across this super famous painting by a guy named Vincent van Gogh, you know, the one with the guy with his ears cut off. And if you're ever wondering to yourself, what was this guy listening to that made him cut his shit off? I can't tell you for certain, but I can almost guarantee you he was probably listening to something by a nigga with two thumbs named Travis Scott, all right? Because this nigga dropped his album Jack Boys 2, probably one of the worst audible experiences I've ever had in my life, all right? I heard the album. This shit was audible pollution, audio harassment. I mean, he was polluting the sonic ecosystem. All right, this was so terrible. Okay, and look, if I'm being honest, I don't even like Travis Scott as an artist, but I do think he's a great salesman. And musically, I just have the feeling that I don't think this guy could even pick out a violin in a lineup of motherfucking broomsticks. Okay, and before y'all say I'm hating, I give it to Travis Scott, all right? He's a revolutionary artist. And factually, he did change the game. But the question remains, did he change it for the better? All right, look, according to Hits Daily Double, Travis Scott's new album, Jack Boys 2, which sold upwards of 250,000 copies first week, had about 188,000 albums that came from bundles. All right, out of 250,000, 188,000 came from bundles. That means musically, he only sold 60 to 70,000 albums first week. All right, his numbers are crazy inflated. Now, for some context, it's clear that Travis Scott dropped this project to step on the Clipse album after they dissed him during their promo tour. And as a result, this album seemed very rushed and more like a weapon used against Pusha T rather than an album for his actual fans. And again, I gave you my opinion. I think this album, again, is just audible pollution. Bro, after I heard this album, I almost considered washing my ears with 1 part bleach, 1 part sulfuric fucking acid, all right? Nevertheless, Travis Scott succeeded in getting the #1 album this week, but we have to realize 70% of his album sales came from merchandise, not the actual music. Off music alone, he sold again 60 to 70,000 copies. Now, this isn't even news for Travis Scott, as his last release was a re-release of his old mixtape, which sold 361,000 copies first week. Holy shit, those numbers are fucking crazy. But out of 361 copies, only 30,000 came from music. Everything else was bundles. 330,000 albums were bundles, okay? They were buying Travis Scott erasers and Travis Scott Krabby Patties and all that bullshit, all right? This literally means, doing the math, that means for his last release, less than 10% of the album sales came from music. That means 90%, over 90% of it came from bundles, all right? Now, look, I'll be fair. Travis Scott isn't the only artist using this tactic, all right? Even other artists use this finesse, including the Clipse, who he was going up against this week. They sold 113,000 albums first week, but only 55,000 of those were actual pure album sales. This means about roughly 50% of their sales came from music and the other 50 was bundles. Now, this is where the controversy comes in, right? Travis Scott dropped his album as a response to the Clipse, and he did this to show the world that he's better than them. Many fans will go solely based off the numbers without the context, and they'll say, hey, Travis Scott sold more than him or almost more than double the Clipse album, meaning that his album must have been better. But you have to look with some context, okay? What we actually see is just off music. Yeah, Travis Scott still outsold him, but they were within range. Travis Scott outsold him roughly by like 10,000 copies. And look, when you listen to the music, it really does make sense. His album, again, wasn't good. I don't even like Pusha T that much, but this album was way better than Travis Scott's Jack Boys, okay? And the reason why this is significant is because hip-hop is competition. Again, I said I dislike Pusha T, and in high school, I used to enjoy some of Travis Scott's songs. But I have to admit, Travis Scott's album is god-awful, especially when it's compared to Pusha T's and the Clipse album. I think if Travis Scott wasn't able to just rely on his clout just to sell his Travis Scott erasers, t-shirts, and whatever bundles he has, it would have actually forced him to compete and really lock in the studio to make banger records, again, to compete against Pusha T, the person that he was going against. But instead, we didn't get a competition. We got a pile of the worst songs imaginable with Travis Scott slapping his it's lit ad libs on that jump. He bundled that shit up with some designer pencils and he got the number one album again. I mean, like, bro, it's literally cheating. And additionally, it just discourages all the other artists who are actually trying. Most notably, back in 2018 when Nicki Minaj dropped her album and it went number two to Travis Scott's Astroworld, which was in its second week. All right, Nicki Minaj, she actually tried to tell us all about the finesse. She was like, oh, Travis Scott's selling all this deluxe, blah, 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 blah. And what did we do? We called her fucking crazy. We called her jealous. We called her a hater. All right. Now, look, all in all, I think Travis Scott is capable of being a great artist and making great music. But I think the problem is he just doesn't have to, okay? And I think this precedent that we're setting, it's incentivizing artists to not really give a shit and not compete and just mail in their project and mail in their work and focus on everything outside of the music. All right. And look, I could be wrong. Let me know what y'all think. Did I get it right? Travis Scott, is he the GOAT? I don't think so. I mean, I think everything y'all call Drake, I think that's literally Travis Scott. But hey, I don't know. Maybe I get some Travis Scott shoes. I might be on his dick. I don't know, bro. Peace.